Now that I've looked at whether or not humanity could survive the flood and the covenant, it seems the next logical step would be to look at the next big species destroying force in video games, the locust. The locusts are a species of intelligent subterranean creatures that would best be described as monsters. Unlike most monsters, the locusts are not only intelligent, but also have a social and political structure, and even a dedicated military wing of their society. Ultimately answering to Queen Myra, the military of the Locust has generals, elite forces like Theron guards, and infantry forces. All of them are able to take orders and execute battle plans. Combined with infantry forces, the Locusts use giant monsters like Corpsers, Berserkers, Cedars, and Brumoks as tank-like assets or anti-air assets, with the Brumoks coming complete with rockets and machine guns. Physically speaking, the locusts are larger and more bulky than humans, especially those of Earth. The locusts have thick, almost reptilian skin, a keen sense of smell, outstanding night vision, and it is hinted at the possibility of multiple hearts to pump the blood throughout their large frame. Their only weakness is their acute night vision can struggle to quickly accommodate rapid changes in ambient light. This is why some locusts are seen wearing goggles that act as sunglasses to counteract this effect. It is important to remember that they can see just fine in the light, they just tend to struggle with rapid increases in bright light. The general way the locusts fight is they come up from beneath the ground in what are known as emergence holes. These holes connect to the overall network of locust tunnels that honeycomb the crust of their planet and would likely do the same here on Earth. This gives the locust a distinct tactical advantage over the military because the locust can dig through just about anything except for solid rock, and that means that a large military formation at a forward operating base setting up for an assault would be vulnerable from an attack they cannot see coming by an enemy who, once they show up, would be too close for artillery or air support. Humanity could deploy seismic sensors to act as early warning systems, but how much time they would give the military to prepare would be hard to calculate. The locusts spending much of their time underground is maybe the single largest challenge with combating them. Aside from bunker buster munitions, humanity has had little desire or need to produce weaponry that would penetrate dirt. These weapons generally vary in scale of the blast. From a weaponry standpoint, the locust would probably have a more powerful weapon with a hammer burst, but it's also not very accurate. Their machine guns are very powerful and a very large threat to any forces downrange. It's also fair to assume that weapons like the M4 could probably kill a locust. It just might take a fair amount of bullets to do the job, or a solid grouping to the head. Machine guns would probably do a fair job, and the larger you go up the scale, i.e. the closer you get to the 50 BMG, the easier it would be to dispatch locust drones. Rocket launchers, grenade launchers, and standard hand grenades would all be likely to do a fairly good job and would be fairly effective at terminating drones. And then you have autocannons like that of the M242 on the LAVs and the 30mm on the AH-64E, and those would make very short work of the majority of the forces of the Locust. Air power might be the biggest threat to the Locust and the biggest asset to the military. Much like the Hammer of Dawn held the Locust underground out of fear of being otherwise burned to a cinder, human air power vastly outmatches that of the Locust. Sure, the Locusts do have Nemesis and Cedars, but neither of those produce anything capable of downing a jet going around or above the speed of sound. Neither of them can stop high-altitude bombing missions, and in most cases air power, as it has always been, will decide the battle. The military has jets that can drop bombs that will precisely hit their target, and helicopters that can engage from over 2 miles away, far enough away that they are not seen or heard. The biggest issue for air power would be logistical, controlling the ground to continue to mine and produce ordnance, fuel, parts, and of course, space to take off and land. As a result, vertical takeoff aircraft like the F-35 and Harrier would likely prove to be highly useful with their ability to take off and land just about anywhere, allowing humans to continually move their air station, avoiding locust attacks. Traditional aircraft would likely need a dry lake, or somewhere that is large and more than likely not going to attract a whole lot of attention, but would most likely thrive best on an aircraft carrier where the Locust cannot touch them or harm their airfield, as it is floating in the middle of the ocean. The bigger issues are the larger and more powerful monsters of the Locust arsenal. Corpsers, Berserkers, Seeders, and Brumoks are all usually killed with the Hammer of Dawn, a space laser, with the Brumok and the Corpser being the only ones ever to be combated in the game and defeated using standard weaponry and nearby resources that are available to the player. Despite all of them being fairly large creatures with presumably very thick skin, I would find it very difficult to believe that a platoon of 4 M1A2 Abrams tanks couldn't be able to hold their own and dispatch any of the larger Locust forces by firing sabot rounds that are estimated at being able to penetrate over 30 inches of solid armor at 2 kilometers. It's a really powerful round, and it would act as a supersized bullet, and it would more than likely do the job in 1 or 2 shots. It's just hard to believe that it couldn't, even with how big they are and how well armored and their exoskeleton. Well, I guess the Corpse would have an exoskeleton. Either way, it'd just be very difficult to believe that they couldn't do it with a sabot round. But with all that said, fighting the Locust in an all-out war would be difficult to survive. They take almost no prisoners, with the exception of a very small amount of labor forces, and their plan calls for the complete extermination of humanity, down to every last man, woman, and child. They have no remorse or compassion, and they appear to show little to no fear in combat. Their natural habitat being underground would make war against them entirely defensive, unless humanity decided to go beneath the surface and fight them in the tunnels. Given the dangerous nature of tunnel warfare and human conflict, such as the danger posed to tunnel rats serving in the Vietnam War, it's safe to assume that those tunnels, while significantly larger than what was encountered in Vietnam, would also be significantly darker and would make support forces like tanks and artillery unavailable, skewing the favor to the Locust and making an all-out conflict against the Locust extremely difficult to win, especially in the tunnels. It would be possible to combat them, and it would be possible to kill them, even the big ones. But long-term warfare would require strongholds where they cannot get to easily and could be seen coming from a long way off, such as a stronghold where they can only attack from above ground. Another good stronghold would putting a large chunk of military forces out to sea to perform amphibious assaults and surgical strikes. Surviving the Locust would be highly unlikely, but theoretically possible. However, such a war would go on for a long time, until, as with all wars, one side cannot sustain the fight. Without the ability to feed our military machine, we would struggle to carry on the fight and would have to allocate a chunk of forces to protect mining and manufacturing facilities. So, in the end, we would likely lose. But that's just my opinion. Let me know yours, and until next time, good night.